Bad Actress by Dim Atlas. Came out in 2018. Rhymesayers label. I have a lot to say about it. I'm going to give you some really general things to start off with, and then we're going to go track by track in chronological order. Sometimes I group songs not in chronological order because I feel like they have similar vibes and I like talk about them in groups. But for a couple of reasons, we're going to do in chronological order, and we'll get to that in a bit. But yes, Dim Atlas put this album out in 2018. I pre-ordered it. I got really into it then, and I wanted to do a review then. And one of the things that held me back, I think, was that I quickly got out of the album. There were certain tracks that I explored more than others, some that I didn't really want to get into, because on first listen I was like, wow, that's depressing. And so right off the bat, I mean, like, one of the things that I have to say is that this album is immensely powerful. It's incredibly good. It's a great album. And one of the things that I've talked about before with album reviews, especially talking about like Slipknot's first record, when I talked about their whole discography, this phrase that pain demands to be felt. And this album demands to be felt. However, the things that you may feel while listening to it aren't necessarily things you'd want to revisit often. It just depends who you are in a person. For me, music affects me on a very deep level. So this album is fantastic. It's beautiful. It's great, but it's dark. And it takes me to places that I don't necessarily want to sit in very long. I think this is an amazing autobiographical documentation. I think that it is poetry. I think that it's art. I think that it also has some great bops, you know, like just great jams to listen to. But it's a diary, you know. It's a personal journal. It's heavy and like has a lot of weight to it. It's 15 tracks, and none of them are like throwaway tracks. None of them are interludes or skits or anything. Like, we've got full-fledged songs for 15 tracks. Like, so it's a lot. And I kind of put the album on the shelf for a couple years and never picked it up again. Didn't really listen to it until, you know, last week, maybe less than that, 4 days ago. I started to get into it again. I don't remember what it was that sparked it. But once I got into it, I got deep into it, and I thought, this is a great time to do this review. Yes, it's late. Most reviews are done, like, right away when the album comes out, especially if that's the kind of channel you are and you're trying to get views and stuff. But also, like, it makes sense to do it right away. But I also just can't force it. So, like, I got into the album then. I did. But I also left it alone, put it on the shelf, didn't come back to it for quite a long time, and this is why. Because it's so good. It's so good that it makes me feel things that I'm uncomfortable feeling. And I don't do well with sadness. So, there are songs on here that are not sad, but they're few and far between. So, with that, one of the things I do want to say, again, is that I'm going in chronological order of, like, the actual track listing and the way it's formatted, because one of the things that I'm not a fan of is that the album feels a little top-heavy to me, and that some of the, like, it's tricky, and I'm going to get into that when I wrap things up at the end, but, like, it feels a little top-heavy, and track listings are always a struggle. It's an interesting thing. I'm like, how do you want to make this fit together and be cohesive? And I want to talk more about that at the end. I think this is a fantastic album. It is a cohesive album. It is a body of work. It's not a mixtape. Like, it's not, you know, like, we've got some very prevalent themes and feelings and emotional stuff happening here, and there's stories, and there's heavy stuff in here that also, again, it reappears. Again, it's a whole body of work. It's not just random stuff thrown together and just been like, oh, I guess that's an album. So, with that, I do also want to mention, I'm not going to get into the lyrics on most of these tracks. I'm going to talk about them more. Like, some I'm going to focus on for a while, and some I'm going to give you, like, 10 seconds of, like, this is what this track is kind of about, and then I'm going to move on. However, I know this will be a longer review. I've done this review once before. I did it yesterday. And I was happy with it, but then I was listening to a song, which I don't know why, because I thought, like, part of me was excited to just be like, hey, I did the review, I just can move on to listening to something else right now because this is, like, affecting me too deeply. But then last night, I was on the way home, I listened to a song, and I thought, man, like, I need to go in on that. Like, I didn't do a good enough job, so I'm doing it again. So here it is, starting off with Tomorrow Party. This is the one song on here that I am going to get deep into the lyrics with. So I'm not going to do this for every track, but there's a reason we got to do it for this one. This song is also just kind of an anomaly on the album. It is the most aggressive and heavy, and I don't mean heavy as in like lyrically or thematically, because that's prevalent on the whole album, but this is like instrumentally heavy. Flow delivery is aggressive, and that doesn't happen like anywhere else on the album. Out of 15 tracks, this is the only one that's like that. And I do need to go through some lyrics with you and stuff. But this is starting off the album. Like, this is giving you a tone for what this album would be. It's the intro track. However, like I said, instrumentally and flow delivery, and like, again, thematically it's setting a stage for the rest of the album, but you don't find this feel anywhere else on the album. This feels, I was going to say bad, but I mean, the album has a lot of things that make you feel bad, but this is an attack of the self, and in general of others that may feel the same way, but it definitely is an attack on the self. We start out with like some kind of distorted stuff, and then like it settles into like some acoustic strumming, almost kind of like some chanting a little bit, and we get right into some cryptic biblical verses, and that's what I'm going to read to you first, because we come back to it in a way. So yeah. So Dem Atlas is basically like narrating in this beginning part of like this kind of, it's akin to like a biblical verse, and you'll see with the diction what's going on here. Good morning, you were asleep, you were in some pain. Walk across the burning sand, walk through the burning river, climb the tallest mountain, and when you arrive you'll see a burning bush. The devil shall appear and offer you everything you thought you desired. Then he'll laugh and toss it in the fire. Rise high in the burning dawn, see the red sun. And then we get into the chorus after that. But we're setting this stage of like this kind of biblical, religious, Christian imagery, and akin to like the language that would be used in a biblical verse. And there's a lot of reason for that. This track is kind of like an epic track. It starts this thing off. And I mean, part of this stuff might be borrowed from Genesis, which basically means the first, the beginning, the origins, right? And that makes a lot of sense. Like, the thing that I believe Dem Atlas does so great is his ability to diversify his lyricism, to make some things incredibly plain, which we're going to get to in another song where he even talks about being plain, and other times he has this depth and this layering that isn't obvious. It's not super obvious, but it's there. The metaphors are there, and the things that he does are purposeful, right? So we've kind of got this thing setting the scene, and then he goes into the chorus, which is basically just like right off the bat we're talking about drug use, and he's like, who's got this, who's got that, and then when he says I'm the life of the fucking party, the beat just drops in. And this, I mean, you turn this up, like, this has the most like soul shaking bass that I've like felt in a long time. So like I had this song on a repeat in my car, and it just made me feel not good, but at the same time it was like, this beat is too good, like, and it was just like, it's got a weight, it's ominous, it's got a darkness to it, and like I said, it's aggressive, and you don't hear that type of aggression really anywhere else on the album. Like, there's some lyrics that are aggressive, but again, even that's incredibly rare. So this whole thing is just, it's something else. Yeah, so the beat just drops in this way that just, and again, the repetition. So it's tomorrow another party, tomorrow another party, tomorrow another party. Break another piñata. That repeats and repeats and repeats. And he's got he's got such a diversity of flow just on this one song alone, and some stuff that like we don't see anywhere else on the album, and things that are on the album that we don't see here. And there's just, to me, this is one of the times that he is just a display of ability. But it's an ability not necessarily of like being fast or being incredibly technical. It's an ability to make the right choices in the right moments to aid the song to be the best that it would be. Other times, I mean, that's throughout the whole album. I mean, like, there's that ability of, like, sometimes there's, like, a slow and steady flow that almost never switches up and changes because the song doesn't need that. Because the song is expressing something that makes way more sense for it to be low and slow and have a certain laziness to it. But this switches up the way that it needs to switch up. So I do want to get into more lyrics here real quick. So in that verse, I mean, it's really kind of the only verse. This is my party, I could die if I want to. Make it rain, hydroplane, hide your pain behind that mask, piss on the wall and call that shit art. One of my favorite passages on the entire album. And I want to deconstruct it a bit here. So there's kind of, I think it's rare for me to say there's a cheekiness to Dim Atlas here on the entire album. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff. But I mean, he's playing with these certain ideas. Like, I should have looked up the song and I forgot to, but I mean, what is it, from like the 50s or 60s? Like, It's My Party, I Can Cry If I Want to. That song, I don't know what it's called even or who it's by, but I think he's making this reference here, but immediately it's like, it's my party, I could die if I want to. And that goes right back to the very beginning. When that bass drop comes in, I'm the life of the fucking party. It's like, okay, you're the life of the party, but also you can die if you want to. Like, immediately we're getting this juxtaposition of like, what is life even? Like, what is fueling your life? And why? And is it these things, like all these substances, and all these things he introduces in this song that are negative coping mechanisms, whether it be drugs, alcohol, women, or just sex in general, I guess, that he's using as a negative coping mechanism in order to probably combat what we see later in the album, which is just severe depression and sadness and anxiety and other things. But like, this isn't life. This is not what he wants, and he tells us that. But that's the thing, we get introduced to suicide pretty quick too in this thing, which is a theme that carries throughout, but it's not done in this aggressive way. So again, this is my party, I could die if I want to. And then there's just, I need to highlight this next line so much. Make it rain and hydroplane. The economy of words that he uses is just so amazing in this section of just like, I feel like I could talk about this one track for so long, and that's why some of these other tracks are going to be like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, that's it. But like, Make It Rain and Hydroplane is just such, like, that is what this song is about. This is like, you know, celebrating to a degree that is destructive, and that is such a perfect way to say that. I mean, like, you know, just like the term of just like make it rain, just like party, just like throw money around like it's nothing, just celebrate, like excess, right? This culture of excess, and why are we doing that in the first place? And in this situation, you know, to cope, right? And hydroplaning off of that, right? Like, I mean, like, make it rain and hydroplane, like hydroplaning, you know, I mean, you're not in control anymore. That's what hydroplaning is. You are skimming the surface of the water and oil and whatever else is mixed to create like your that scenario of hydroplaning with your use of speed and what you're driving on, and you lose control. And just the economy of words that he uses to get to that point. And again, the aggressive delivery is just, I can't get over it. Hide your pain behind that mask, piss on the wall and call that shit art. And just a whole other thing where it's like, I mentioned this album is so autobiographical. I believe these stories are his. Like sometimes you have an artist telling a story that's either a fictional story or it's someone else's story, and you know that and it's obvious. And I feel like these are his stories. This is him. This is what he's giving us. These are his. I keep thinking of Sage Francis, personal journalist, but I'm like, these are his personal journals. This is his diary. This is him. This is vulnerability. This is exposure. This is a lot of openness that's right there. And playing with that line of like of self-doubt and insecurity, but also having a certain amount of confidence, or maybe it's not care, to that note, like piss on the wall and call the shit art. It's like, no, this album is art. This album has so much depth and sincerity to it that, yeah, I call that art. I call everything about this that makes it perfect, like all the choices that were made, and the raw expressions also, like that combination does make this art. But there's that acknowledgement of like, this is just like again, that insecurity of like, I'm just throwing shit at the wall and whatever, I'm calling it art, whatever. Or that other people do it, you know? And again, part of this is a scathing contempt and what's the word I'm looking for? It's a scathing contempt and judgment and criticism against not just himself for coping this way, but I feel people in general. Because there's a couple times where he talks about, you know, people who, why are people in such a rush to get famous and then whatever, and what does that do anyway? So it's definitely one of the few times I feel like he criticizes a certain group of people other than himself or specific people in his life. But he's definitely being very specific too about hating the fact that he's doing this. I need to, before I wrap up discussing this one track and move on to some others, this track feels like an exorcism. I mean, this whole album feels like, in some ways, a purging, but this track, with the aggressive nature of it, and like it again, those biblical references, it feels like an exorcism of needing to get this out and being aggressive about it. Like when you see an exorcism, you know, displayed in a movie or a book, it's generally not like a peaceful, like chill thing that happens. It's wild and out of control and aggressive and scary. And like I said, this track, Tomorrow Party, is like the most heavy in instrumentation and delivery, vocally, lyrically, every part of it. It's aggressive and it's dark and it's heavy. And it's hard to follow that up with anything else on the album, which is why I'm like, man, I'm so focused on the track list, because next track that we get into, Never Belonged, it kind of starts off sad and slow, which is probably the majority of songs on this album. At least half of the 15 tracks feel that way. And it's difficult to follow up Tomorrow Party. Like, it's not a standalone random intro track. It's a full-fledged song, and it's just, how do you follow that up and make it cohesive? It's really difficult. You know, the first lines we hear on this, on Never Belonged, are "By myself, found myself." And that slow and sad kind of beginning gets upbeat pretty quickly and kind of becomes celebratory in a way, which is another thing we see on the album a handful of times, is like a happy sad, which we're going to get back to that term in a bit, but also like a celebratory thing, but also acknowledging the faults and the struggles at the same time. So By Myself, Found Myself. I mean, that's something that, like, this whole album is a struggle too, is like figuring out and acknowledging the issues and finding himself along the way in order to like try and be in a forward motion, I guess, in order to actually move on and move ahead. So that's a thing that's found here right away. Again, we're acknowledging drug use kind of right off the bat, and using that as an escaping, as a method of escape. And we get two other things here again. Like everything on the album, I feel like that you find later on the album is pretty much on the song, except for one thing that we'll get into later. But he also brings up suicide again, better learn to fly or suicide, and that's gonna pop up a bunch. And it's done here like the way he delivers that line with this beat. It's not done in like this super sad or depressing way. It's kind of like, reminds me of Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, like get busy living or get busy dying. But it's done here as like a push, not a depressive, sad, I'm gonna do it. He's saying like I need to get on track. We also get introduced to like toxic relationships, instability, uneven ground within a relationship. Part of that chorus is like basically just want to talk to you, don't want to talk to you, want to talk to you, don't want to talk to you. I'm in this headspace, I don't want to talk to you. I'm in this headspace, I do want to talk to you. And that pull and pull, that push and pull, that back and forth, that tug of war, that's prevalent on the album as well. That just is, it's on the album several times. I don't know if it's one relationship that he speaks of or if it's multiple at all. But it's clear that he's got issues with either a relationship or certain romantic relationships in general. But sometimes, something that, I was going to save till later, but you could replace the romantic relationship with drug use so much on this album, and I feel like it's the same thing for him. So, again, kind of like an upbeat track that doesn't start out that way, but we hit all these themes that are going to be on the album, but they're introduced in a way that's not as heavy as they will be later. Very next song, though, we get Early Train. And it's one of those things that I was alluding to when talking about things in Tomorrow Party, about his lyricism, is that he can and he does deliver his words with such a deliberateness, sometimes it's incredibly plain. And he points that out, like on Early Train. Like, if you don't know what taking the early train is and you don't know that metaphor, I mean, like, we're talking about suicide. We're talking about checking out early. We're talking about ending your life before it would naturally come to an end by either, old age or health or whatever would happen to you that is not by your own hand, right? And so he does use a metaphor, but I mean, he's also saying, like, in the chorus, he's saying, I'm taking the early train, I'm making it very plain, I'm taking the easy way out. And so that whole song is just like, it kind of is like a sad sweetness. He kind of has this crooning singing that he does frequently on this album that kind of really gets introduced here. It's one of the most suicidal tracks in the album, I think. Like, he mentions suicide a bunch, but on this song, Early Train, he's like, this is what this is about. It has general stuff, and it also gets pretty specific. But again, he's got a quality and sincerity in his voice that I don't know how to describe. Again, with that sad crooning that he does, that's very very evident here. It's one of those things, like I said, like there's a stability on this song that it needs. Like sometimes it feels like you're droning on, but sometimes I think that's what depression feels like. I don't know what else to say about that track. But from there, we get into Gratitude. Now, Gratitude, I think, is the one song that I could still listen to off this album without feeling a certain kind of way that would lead me down the path of ruination, that wouldn't get me depressed or sad or into a dark hole. Gratitude is a celebration. It is like the standalone track here that is like the most upbeat in every way, being high on yourself. It's a track about moving on. It's kind of like a smirk. If I were to give this thing a facial expression, but not like a crappy smirk, like a smiling, sassy smirk of acknowledgement, and it's about finding yourself. He's got powerful singing on this thing. The vocal performance, he's really letting loose with like just, again, some of the style of singing that he can do. But yeah, Gratitude, I mean, he references like "Now My Love Has Gone Away," but it doesn't get any deeper than that. It doesn't get into like, oh, and I miss you and I want you back and like I don't know how to deal with it and whatever. That stuff is everywhere else on the album, but here he's just discussing sometimes too, like I just want to be somebody that people like for, you know, I just want to be who I am and people like me for me, and I don't want to pretend to be anybody else. But again, this whole thing is just, it's a celebration. It's a great track. It's definitely one that I listen to more frequently, but this whole first half of the album I listen to more frequently, which we're going to get into later. But yeah, for me this is like one of the standalone tracks of like I could revisit this song anytime and feel good about it and not kind of like get dragged down into like a dark place. Just great track. Bad Loves Company comes right after that. It starts off with this really Charlie Brown vibe, especially in the instrumentation, and what I mean by that is that he actually had an EP, like Charlie Brown EP, and it featured like snippets and sound bites and stuff of Charlie Brown stuff, I think on every track. But also like he has a song called Happy Sad, and that's the that's the EP is like Happy Sad is like him expressing these things in a certain way that's just like, it's, I don't know what else to describe. Happy Sad is the perfect way to describe it. But like Bad Loves Company comes in with this kind of like slow kind of like plotting, and like it just has this Charlie Brown vibe to it that I don't know how to describe unless you know Charlie Brown. And like I didn't grow up with Charlie Brown really, but like I'd seen a little bit here and there, and it makes sense. Yeah, it just, that's the vibe that we start off with anyway. It's kind of the closest I think we get to a full-fledged love song sometimes in the way that I would say love songs would be. There's other times where we reference love in a sweet and nice way on the album, but here, especially with the chorus, had a dream that you were mine. It was sometime in July, and we keep repeating that. Verses they're not necessarily him like having a crush on someone or pining over somebody or whatever. It's more about him. But it kind of like, that's the thing, we get this like Charlie Brown vibe, and then it kind of picks up on this upbeat, a little bit of a neutral beat and kind of like a nice flow of, it almost sounds confident in that first verse at the very beginning of it, and then we settle into some super not good feelings though, and again, the way that he can cram all the stuff into one song and make it cohesive is beautiful. However, it also is like, man, if we just didn't have this sad part in the song, I would listen to it more because it affects me. But like, I think one of the saddest lines on the album here is a single line, is "All my life I've been sorry," and like the beat comes down into that section too, and he just repeats that. Like, "All my life I've been sorry" is like a thing that he repeats a lot, and repetition is a huge thing that he uses, and uses it well. Like, it's not out of inability to express. It's using that method effectively, that device, that literary device effectively, to provide a certain quality of feeling. So, yeah, Bad Loves Company, we sink down into like a sad place for that. Because you kind of get a good feeling a little bit, and then it's just like, nope, no, we can't feel good for long. Not on this album. Never Knows Best is the next track. We kind of get, like, I don't know if it's rain or the ocean or both. We get this, like, soundbite at the beginning, and then it kind of goes into, like, well, this beat that, like many of them, are, like, sad and slow, but he says, damn. Like, we hear this ocean noise, kind of like the tide coming in or going out, and then, like, it feels like rain, and then damn, but it's, like, it's a failure. Like, whatever that damn was, like, it's packed with, like, a flavor of disappointment in himself. And just, like, another failure. And, yeah, it's depressing. It kind of has this lazy, longing singing in the track. Getting lost in destruction was a phrase that I wrote when I was listening to this. He talks here in some ways about using women like substances, right? To use as a coping mechanism, to somehow make himself feel better. Him just talking about wanting to be with someone, not wanting to be alone. Like, he wants to be with And sometimes he says you, and is you one specific person, or is you anybody that can make him feel better? But yeah, never knows best. We go from Battle of His Company into like another layer of sadness with like never knows best, and it's just depressing. It's so depressing. From there, we get into Pneumonia, another standout track for me that I really, really like. It has more of like a celebratory feel to it, to a degree, but it's not as just like straightforward as Gratitude is, where it's like, hell yeah, let's pump this and like feel good about ourselves. It's not that simple on this track. It's another battle with uncertainty in a relationship. In that first verse, he talks about like, you know, missing this person and wanting to try again, but also like he knows that this person's not good for him, this relationship's not good for him. I need you like I need pneumonia is like the chorus, like it's part of the chorus. And this is not, he's acknowledging this isn't good, but then he's acknowledging the struggle of like wanting to keep running back to this person, which, you know, which comes back again later in the album as well. He equates himself to a child here very explicitly. He even says, take care of me like a child. And he says he's always messing around. And he also, at one point, man, like in his vocal delivery when he says, like, he's basically asking, like, what can I do? And he says, some more drugs, some more pills, nothing soothes me. And the way he delivers that line, nothing soothes me, is just, it just gets right into your soul. And again, but like that chorus brings us to like this upbeat, like celebratory thing almost of like him acknowledging, I need you like I need pneumonia. Like I don't need you. Like this is not good for me. I know that it's not good for me. And that acknowledgement should carry me forward to moving on without you and doing what I need to do for me and what's best for me. But again, it's not that simple because he's got this thing of like, he's relating to being childlike, of to needing something, of needing to be taken care of maybe that's why he's running back to this person. And then towards the end of the song, like, he just drops into this place again that's so sad. And he says, baby, I'm sad. And that repeats. He's talking about feeling like a heavy load and just feeling sad. But again, just that plainness of like, baby, I'm sad. Like, being in a place where you even have to say that to somebody, or you'd want to say that to somebody, just the plainness. And again, his vocal delivery here, his again, the economy of words and lyricism fits so perfectly with what his delivery is. And again, his choice and method of delivery is so careful and authentic and sincere, and it feels sometimes like he's just speaking to that person. Yeah, anyway, Pneumonia. It's a great track, but it's also heavy. It has a lot of variance and weight to it. Yeah. Music Man. It's my other standout track. There's 4 tracks on this album that are my favorite. Tomorrow Party, Gratitude, Pneumonia, Music Man. Those are my favorites, and they're all in the first half of the album, which I'm going to talk about right after I finish talking about Music Man. Again, it's got like a sweet, almost nostalgic sadness to it. It doesn't feel horrible right off the bat, which is foreshadowing. But instrumentally, it doesn't feel horrible. It just feels like, oh, it kind of has like the sweet, nostalgic sadness. And this is the only song where I'm going to refer to the video for part of this. But it complements the song directly, but it also like informs and gives a little more depth, which I like with videos. Like, I don't like joke videos. I mean, sometimes live videos are cool too, whatever. But I like when videos can actually complement the song and almost give you more insight. And that's what this video does. And it does it in a very simple way. But talking about the song first. So that first verse actually has part of, like I mentioned, like there's almost like a love song quality on some of the songs in this sweet way. And this is one of those songs where the first verse, it's kind of like he has a crush on somebody. He notices somebody. He takes an interest in somebody. And it's hopeful and it's positive. But there's also a little bit of sadness to it. He's very lonely. He's in the bar alone. He's drinking alone. He talks about how these other girls that are sitting at the bar won't give him the time of day or keep him company, and he is speaking to another woman that he's like, man, you're so beautiful. Like, he just doesn't even know what else to say. And he acknowledges that. Again, the plainness. Like, on Early Train, he says, like, I'm making it very plain. Like, he actually uses those words. And here he's saying, like, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and I don't know what else to say to you as you roll your eyes, but, like, that's all that I can say. Like, I just don't know. Like, and it's endearing and cute. And then... I mean, there's a moment here that I really want to highlight too with just decision making again in this first verse, because he breaks up his flow and he's saying like, I don't want to replicate it because like I can't sing, but he is this like ooh, he's like ooh, you're so fly, can I have your time? And then he does it again. Where he has that ooh in there, and it's just a beautiful, soulful, like, oh, it's beautiful. It's like butter. It's just like, again, when he hits certain notes and the way that he does it with his singing, it's just, they're just highlights on the album to me. But he says it again, and he says, don't you know that I could do you right? And again, it's like this sweetness in kind of like a confident moment and a vulnerable moment, but not in the same way we've seen before, because he's speaking directly to somebody, right? And then the second verse, the thing that I wanted to highlight was that the second verse has like, I'm going to have to like break out the lyrics here again. It also has a variance in the flow, but it doesn't do the same thing. Like, it doesn't use the same device at all, where he was like, this positive, like, happy, like, ooh, like, that's not what he's doing. He kind of, like, I don't know, it goes the opposite way. So I like the fact that this complements the song thematically, where he was, like, in this higher place, he felt good. I mean, even in the first verse, he says, I can't leave because I want to go with you. Can I stay the night? I feel all right. The way he delivers, I feel all right, doesn't sound like he feels all right, but maybe if you take it literally like all right, doesn't mean great. So, and then that second verse, it kind of comes back down because he's not talking to this woman anymore. She's not in the picture. He's just talking to himself and feeling incredibly lonely. Talks about everybody leaving. And he kind of has this, again, it's like this delivery device where he kind of just changes his flow. Sing a song, just one more song, sing it strong and make it long. He kind of goes back into the regular flow for a bit, and then he comes back again. It's better than you've ever felt, but not as bad as being by yourself. But I mean, it just like, it hits in the same places where in that first verse there's the variance, and on the second verse there is also a variance of breaking up the flow, but instead of like being this like hopeful, beautiful, nice thing, it like cuts it back down, and it's just, again, a technical thing that I noticed that I just really love about it. But the other thing is that, so, I mean, the last minute of the song is just like really sad strumming, and like him saying there's no one around to talk to, everyone's laughing in the bathroom, basically like the party's not where he's at, right? Nothing to say, but how are you? Just like casual nothingness. Yeah, and he's just sitting there alone and sad, saying he misses the music man in this like really sad strumming that happens. Now, I don't think I've ever talked about a video before when talking about an album, but the thing that it gives you is that in the song, he's talking to this woman, and so I always pictured it. I have a very visual mind. I always pictured it. He's like talking to a woman, being like, "Hey, like, you're beautiful, and I don't know what else to say, but like, can I go home with you? Like, I don't want to be rude, but like, I want to spend time with you, and like, I think that I could do you right. Like, I want to treat you well." And like, I mean, there's a double entendre there, but like, in the video, he doesn't talk to the woman. He sees this woman come in. She's dancing by herself. She's feeling it, and he takes notice of her, and he smiles at just like that she's there. But when he is actually delivering that verse, he's still sitting at the bar. She's way over there. He doesn't even talk to her. He acknowledges that thing too of like, oh, these girls in a row won't keep me company, and it pans over to the girls Like these three women that are there, and yeah, they're laughing by themselves, they're not talking to him. But he does not get up and talk to this woman that he's talking to or about at all. And at one point, he goes to the washroom, he walks right past her, and he can't bring himself to speak to her. And I feel like that adds this extra element of like, this is in his head. He wants to say these things to her, and he can't. Like, he doesn't do it. And that just adds like this extra layer of like authenticity to the story, and like being like, oh snap, like you couldn't even bring yourself to do it. And it makes it obviously more sad too. But that's the first half of the album. That's 9 tracks out of 15. And I mentioned the album is very top heavy for me. I feel like all these songs on here are extremely powerful and strong. This first half is incredibly powerful and strong, and we've got a lot of shifting and variance with like celebratory stuff, like upbeat stuff. We've got aggression, darkness. We've got this soft sadness. We've got some kind of like a little bit of hope, but not really. But the second half of the album, you just come down. It's just you come down. And I don't know if that is purposeful or not. Making a track list is really difficult, especially when you've got 15 songs. And when a lot of them end up being thematically similar, but not similar enough. Like we have things coming and going and reappearing, but I can't say like this song's redundant. Like I feel like every song needs to be here. I wouldn't say we need to get rid of any, but it's just like a weird thing with the placement. And he leaves off like I said, this second half is so it drags you down. It's heavy. So the 10th track is Ronnie. Sad and slow. And it has this line, when you love someone and they don't love you. Like, I don't know what to call it, because it's like an agony in his voice, but at the beginning when he says that line and delivers it, it's not excruciating. It's mourning and it's grieving, but it's passionate. It's passionate in a way. I mean, no, that's not the right word. It's like, it's, there's an acceptance to it and such a depression and sadness to it. But the song reaches a crescendo, and when he delivers that line during then it feels like passionate agony. It feels like not an accepted pain that you just live through, but one that you feel like you can't live through when you love somebody that doesn't love you. So that brings it down hard. Speaking about down, the next track is Let Down. And this, man, like we've got like this ominous digital weird kind of sound happening at the beginning, but also like these slow kind of like acoustic guitar stuff going on. And that's kind of perfect to set the stage for the song. I feel like this is kind of a standalone track thematically, where it feels like very autobiographical about his childhood, and we're going to get into that more. But he's basically telling the story of, you know, how his parents fought, and there was physical abuse in the house, and he brings up suicide again. At this point, though, he talks about being 4, 5, 6 years old, wanting to slit his wrists. Again, this is like very plainly put. It's also the first time I think he mentions like not believing in God. And he's like, no God is here. He's like, I can't even find a corpse. He's talking about there being blood on the floor. He's talking about his parents establishing a pattern of, you know, this physical abuse, and then mom leaving as a punishment, but obviously coming back, which we see not necessarily the physical abuse part, but like him running back to someone that he shouldn't be with. And that's maybe something that was a learned behavior. So, Let Down is really heavy. It's a super heavy track that gets very specific, very autobiographical, very detailed, and it's kind of like that song fucks you up. Like, it's not one that I enjoy listening to. It's a good song in the aspect that he expresses himself well, and like, it's like a good diary entry expressing pain. It just bummed me out just to even talk about right now. Burnout is the next song. Slow, depressed. It feels drugged out. It feels dragged out. He's alone. He's burning out like a candle. He's talking about everything burning down. He's talking about him burning out. Again, allusions to suicide and not wanting to be here anymore and his life ending. That's the best way I could put Burnout. Running Back is like an interesting one because this, like I mentioned, this whole second half of the album, the back half being kind of like doesn't have as much upbeat stuff and it's pretty heavy and low. But Running Back, it has a pretty neutral beat. Like it doesn't, like I don't know, it has like neutral is the best way I can describe it. It doesn't have a certain feel to it other than the flavor that you would give it. Like it's upbeat, I guess, like in a certain way, but like he gives it like a certain flavor. Like immediately you just want to like bob your head to it and you start feeling it, and it's pretty steady. And he brings some soul to the track too, which I don't think I've used that terminology here before, but just like with some of his delivery here. But again, this whole thing is about that toxic relationship that he's alluded to before, of being like, why do I keep running back to you? Like, why do I keep doing that? This is not a good thing. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it anyway, and like I can't help myself. And that's what this whole song is about. Again, we've got songs on here that deal with like multiple things, and then we've got some songs that are like very straightforward. Like this is the suicide song. This is the song about running back to somebody. This is, and like I like that he does that. After that, we get into Born Yesterday. We have like slow strings, sadness. There's an innocence in this song that gets brought up that we've kind of come. We've kind of been brought to that word innocence before when he's talking about feeling like a child. And I mean, feeling like a child in Pneumonia, where he's like, take care of me like a child, and nothing soothes me. Just that word, soothe, is like, isn't the same as saying like, you know, drugs and pills, they don't make me feel better. It's like, but that word soothe is so specific to how you would, how you would talk to a child or a baby or a toddler, right? Someone who needs soothing. And then, with Let Down, he talks about being a child and the innocence that came there. And also the anger that he felt because of the incidences that were happening. But Born Yesterday is a different kind of innocence. I mean, he can't get right, basically, is how I would word that. Which is kind of like good that it follows Running Back, because like, yeah, he can't seem to just do what he knows he needs to do. He acknowledges not wanting to waste time on, I mean, he brings this up actually, I think in the first song too, like not wanting to waste time on people that he shouldn't be with, right? At one point he says women that don't deserve it. And he does it anyway. But the innocence here too is just like that whole thing of being born yesterday. He's just saying like, man, I can't learn. Like I don't get it. Like I've had all these experiences and I don't learn from it. I keep doing the same shit over and over and over again. But it's delivered in this incredibly sad, slow way. And just has this innocence about it that's just like, oh man, like I wish you could do better. We're here in the last two tracks now. Can It Fall? We start off with organs playing. And I think this is interesting because like maybe there's use of organs in other songs that I didn't pick up on, but it's at the very beginning here. And it brings us back to the beginning because when I think of organs playing in this fashion, I think of hymns. I think of church. I think of Christianity, which we got at the very beginning. Again, it's kind of like a sad song, but it's a little bit of glimmer of hope and trying to find his own way. And like, again, acknowledging like this stuff needs to kind of go away and I want to get better. Which brings us to Gotta Get Over, which is the last song. It definitely, the hopeful part of it kind of kicks it up. It picks it up a bit. It gets soulful. The instrumentation follows that as well. Or I mean the delivery or the lyrics follow the instrumentation, whatever way you want to put it. But that doesn't last long because in the end of the song, which is the last stuff that you hear, it brings it freaking right back down again. He's talking about suicide, and he's asking like himself, like, why you got to be sad all the time? At least I think he's talking to himself. It's speculation, but it's like, why do you have to be sad all the time? Why do you got to be sad? Like that's repeated, and like, man, like again, I assume that these choices were purposeful. I assume that he knows what he's doing. But it just sucks because, like, if you reordered the track listing, you would come out of the album with a different experience, right? And it's like, well, you'd think the obvious thing would be to, like, let's have a song like Gratitude. Let's have that be at the very end. Let's be like, fuck it, like, I'm going to be who I am and be myself, and I feel good. But that's not what it ends on, right? We end off, again, him talking about suicide, him talking about not being here anymore, and, like, not wanting to be, and it's just not good, and why you got to be sad all the time. And, like, that's just a downer, obviously. But if that's, I mean, it closes the album on that, and that's what you're left with. So, I think that the first 9 songs are generally the best songs in quality, but I have to admit that there's a bias that I'm trying not to have, but it's there, that, like, the sadder the song is, the less that I like it, because I don't want to listen to that song. It doesn't mean that it's not done well. It's all of these songs are done well. All of these songs are good. In every way. You know, lyricism, delivery, flow, and instrumentation, like, everything is done well. It's just that, like, man, like, I still feel like, man, these other songs were just better because of, but I can't, like, I don't know. There's just more to them. But, like, sometimes a song can be incredibly plain because it needs to be, because it's giving off that emotion. It needs you to feel that. So it's really difficult for me. Like, I feel like the album is top heavy. But I know why I feel that way, and it's really difficult for me to compartmentalize and separate myself. But I know the quality of all these songs are good. Wrapping up the album, I need to go back to some things we haven't talked about yet. I mentioned there's no skits or interludes. But at the end of some tracks, you can hear kids playing in the background. And it kind of harkens back to this innocence thing, which also, I think he set that stage in, like, 2013 or 2015, I don't remember what year now, where he had, like, the Charlie Brown EP. And it's like this happy sad, it's like a reminiscence of childhood and innocence and whatever else. But, like, man, like, having those kids just there, just playing in the background, it's at recess or it's at a park or, like, somewhere where kids are laughing and playing, it's such a simple device, but it brings you to a place of, like, man, maybe he missed out on that. Like, it's not even the fact that maybe he wants to be back in a simpler time where he was just laughing and playing with friends. He might not have had that. Like, when you go to a track like Let Down and you can try to apply that to his life of, like, in his childhood, of those things taking over that home environment and whatever else that he's gone through, like, it's not even missing simpler times as a child. It's like the times that he had as a child were fucked up. They were bad. They're not good. Like, so it's like missing out on something completely. This album just feels like a purge of present problems and, like, past issues that are affecting his present, right? But again, I think that those little snippets at the end of some of the songs that have, like, the kids playing or whatever else, that it just, like, brings you to, like, this thing of innocence and missing out on and, like, wishing to have that, or just, like, the sweetness that those moments could have that he doesn't have. All in all, once again, the album demands to be felt. Pain demands to be felt. This is a very painful album. Purging is a painful process. And other than Gratitude, I think, like, every single song on here has a sadness to it. Tomorrow Party doesn't feel sad, I guess. It's aggressive. And it's angry about negative things. Gratitude just, like, is super positive, it feels like. You acknowledge the negative in order to, like, feel positive about the fact that you're moving on and going in a better direction. That's all I can really say here. It's just a downer of an album in a lot of ways, but not because it sucks. It's because it's so good. With that, we'll see you another time.